Well, I'm excited. You're in for one of our early, in fact, premier sessions on the grassroots entrepreneurs in medtech who can't get the coverage, but deserve the coverage.
Thank you.
And you and I were chatting about your application on sleep apnea. And I thought it'd be fun if you could share with our audience what your solution is providing to the marketplace and how it's replacing the current standard of care.
Sure. So the current standard of care is PAP, positive airway pressure, and it is the gold standard. None of the other solutions that are available work as well as PAP. But the problem is more than 50% of the population fails to use it long term. There are many reasons for this, but the leading causes are claustrophobia when trying to fall asleep with a mask on, semi-conscious removal where you rip it off in the middle of the night, many patients complain of that, or leaks. So we're taking an out-of-the-box approach using a robot. And the big idea is that we can allow the patient to fall asleep normally without anything on their face, no masks, no straps, no hoses. And after they fall asleep, the robot automatically places and holds the mask at the correct location. So this can also address semi-conscious removals where someone tugs at it or grabs it. The system can detect that and then momentarily retract and then replace the mask. In addition to that, because we have a robot and the robot integrates the ventilator, we can sense if it's not delivering therapy properly and readjust the mask automatically to ensure that it's delivering the therapy correctly.
So I love this. I just got back from the Medica show in Dusseldorf last week. I was really privileged to sit on a panel with the KUKA organization.
Sure.
And we looked at organizations that were applying robotics to potential opportunities in the medtech space. Let's talk about the sleep apnea market, a massive market.
Sure.
So we were talking about, I did my homework, it was something like 4 billion US, 5 or 6 billion worldwide, and a CAGR somewhere between 6 and 10%.
Exactly. So the annual rate is growing significantly, and this is primarily due to better awareness of the condition and also the availability of at-home sleep apnea tests. So it used to be the case to get diagnosed with sleep apnea, you had to go into a sleep lab, you had to get hooked up to all the equipment, you had to spend the night there. No longer is that the case. Now they can send you a kit in the mail that your doctor prescribes, and you wear this device overnight, and then they could diagnose you with apnea. So that's a big reason why it's growing and better awareness.
And I love that too, because as diagnostics get better, it's a market unlock.
Correct.
For therapeutics.
Correct.
Right? So let's take it a step further. You also, and this is what I love about the serendipitous position I get to sit in and our firm gets to sit in. You and I just connected on the phone. You reached out to me because you know my work in robotics and medtech.
Yep.
And I love the conversation. And here's what really turned me on is obviously I'm jazzed about robotics and medtech and health tech. But you started from the problem first.
Correct.
And then backed your way out and said, robotics may be the way to go here. And you didn't buy a robot off the shelf, which we'll talk about.
Sure.
But because you came from a robotics background, you solved the problem a different way.
Sure. So I knew that there were issues with sleep apnea treatment. My father-in-law had been pulling his mask off every night for 20 years, so I knew that there was a general issue. And then I was chatting at a party once with a friend of mine who was in the diagnostic space, and he was telling me how he's diagnosing all these people with sleep apnea, but they can't stand to use the equipment. They keep, leaving it on their shelf. They never want to put it on. And I dug into it and I talked to him a little more, and it was because they don't want to fall asleep with it on, or they just pull it off every night. So it dawned on me, I was working in robotics, developing robotics at the time, that hey, well, what if you could just fall asleep normally and then have a robot do it? So for me, it was like a natural flow of thinking to go from just let them fall asleep and then deliver the therapy after falling asleep. And robotics, and especially computer vision and AI, enable that technology to happen.
And you've incorporated not just robotics, but advanced AI, facial recognition.
Correct. Computer vision, neural networks for doing the facial recognition, force-controlled robotics, sleep state detection, which we're going to integrate. That's going to use AI as well. So all of these areas depend upon AI. This wouldn't have been pragmatic 10 years ago, because there's been so many advancements in computer vision, AI, especially with compute and the cost of compute nowadays. It makes it a realistic, inexpensive possibility to actually do this.
Yeah. And there's another component here that you need to take credit for, is robotics is fantastic. However, the current state of robotics in medtech blocks out 99% of the applications because the robotic arms are built for too big of a payload. They're way too expensive. They're already established, and you can't make the economics work. And most people are not roboticists. So what I really loved about this concept when you and I are first chatting, and then I've seen it, is let's go the other way. How can we develop a robot that'll pass through FDA rigor? And of course, that's a direct correlation to what problem is it trying to solve and what risk is it putting the work team or the patient under. So take me through that thought process and sort of the genesis of that.
Sure. So my previous company developed expensive robotics for surgery. And they were way too expensive for an application like this. But fortunately for this application, there are much more forgiving requirements. So you can make an application-specific robot that takes advantage of the lower speeds, the lower payloads, the more forgiving accuracy, and make a robot that's tailored specifically for this. And by doing that, you get to use less expensive components, commodity components, plastic components, and that drives the cost down to enable this technology. So this really is an enabling aspect of Restful Robotics, is making a low-cost, ultra-low-cost robot that's application-specific.
See, listen to this, FDA, listen to this reimbursement, listen to this private equity, listen to this venture, right? There's nothing wrong with the intuitive arm. There's nothing wrong with the CMR arm, an Ascensus arm, a KUKA arm, nothing wrong with it. But for at-home use,
correct,
or these changing centers of care, these application-specific robotic platforms that can now be empowering to bring better care, better access, better outcomes. It looks like you've got a concept there that I really wanted our audience to have a look at.
Sure. And this is along the lines of some of the other videos I've seen, for example, with Exact Robotics, where they make an application-specific robot that's tailored for their, for what they want to do. Mm-hmm. It doesn't make sense to use a larger arm for that application, right? They design one specifically that enables our technology. It's small, lightweight, and it does the job, and it does it well.
Yeah, Harel Godot's company, great company. Stick a needle XYZ axis. It's the size of a laptop, fits on your pelvis or your chest, exactly, or wherever you want to put it. And actually, he's got Microbot. He's got a disposable robot.
Yep.
Okay. So I love that direction, that robotics, both application specific. You don't have to buy it off the shelf. Again, KUKA's great for certain applications, right? There's this. I just had an interview with Anthony Fernando from Ascensus here last week. Right equipment for the right mission.
Exactly.
And that's what you've done here. So share with our audience the technologies in this, and I want to go have a look at the technology.
Sure. So the main components of the technology, the first one is low-cost robotics. That enables this application. PAP and apnea treatment is.
And we'll be able to make it through the FDA with your robot?
Yes, of course. Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of experience designing robotics like that at Mako. So low-cost robotics, force-controlled robotics. So you need to make sure that the robot's applying the right force at the right time in the right way. Computer vision, again, becoming mainstream now, especially in medical applications. So that enables automatic face feature recognition, automatic tracking, and sleep state measurement. Sleep is a big area now. Sleep measurement is a big area now. Our plan is to integrate with off-the-shelf products. For example, I'm wearing the Oura Ring. So this ring tracks my sleep state. The iWatch tracks your sleep state. So we can integrate with these technologies to enable the robot to place the mask at the right point in time so the patient can fall asleep normally.
Huh. So I'm going to play devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
Right? So you've got an open architecture and empowering other technologies.
Yes.
How is the FDA viewing those right now as a data source input to applying something therapeutic that is going to be reimbursable in an application?
So great question. I think if you take a look at, for example, what Apple's done with their iWatch and the AFib detection, that's a perfect example. So now you have a consumer product initially designed as a consumer product, but they realize there's a big value add in spending time developing the software, the hardware, the algorithms to make it into a real medical device and get the clearance, and they did it. So we're going to leverage a similar idea where we can leverage the sleep state estimation to place the mask on the patient. In terms of the economics, the great thing about what we're doing, it's a razor blade model. It's not just the robot. We get the recurring revenues from the disposables, which all the companies that do well in this space, they generate significant revenues from the disposables. So we've developed our own line of proprietary components that you have to use our components with the robot.
And what you haven't mentioned yet, and I know you've thought of, is the massive amounts of data you're aggregating.
Yes, I have thought about it. So the other great thing is we're going to have a camera on the patient continuously monitoring throughout the night. So we feel we're very well positioned for doing a large-scale data capture, large-scale analysis, large-scale correlation between patient health, sleep health, and having a large amount of data so we can make good correlations between all of that.
So what are the turds in the punch bowl on this one?
I need to convince people that it's usable, that people are going to accept having a robot next to their bed and they're willing to fall asleep with it. I pitched a lot of VCs, I pitched a lot of angel investors, and the pushback that I get is, who wants to have a robot next to them falling asleep? And I think it's important to take a step back and look at the perspective of the struggling patients. Like you were saying earlier, to start with the problem. The problem is we have a gold standard. The gold standard is not used by 50% of the population because they can't stand it. So let's think of a smart way to get them to use the gold standard, because no other therapies work as well as CPAP. Surgery doesn't work as well, implants don't work as well, the dental distraction devices, nothing works as well as CPAP. We really want to get them to use CPAP. So what can we do to be smart, to take advantage of the latest advances in technology to use CPAP? And the fact that they're struggling, I think they're going to be accommodating to welcoming this. I mean, now if you go online, you go to Reddit, you go to the forums, there are people who are suicidal. You know, they just can't deal with falling asleep with the mask on. They don't want to get surgery. They're chronically tired. They want a solution. So now we come and say, hey, well, we have a solution. You have to have a robot next to your bed, but you can go back to sleep normally. I think they'll welcome that solution.
I would agree with you. So I went through massive back issues years ago, and I would have written any check out of my checkbook to get out of that pain. I have a teammate who suffers from migraines. He probably would have given a limb to get out from underneath that migraine. So I wonder if you just haven't hit the right VC who's not had a sleep apnea problem, because he or she likely would be able to align with the patient population who would do anything.
I agree.
So
I agree.
That's interesting. Okay, so who wants a robot? So we just have to rename the word robot. Right? And maybe make it the form factor, so to speak, match their interior decorating in their bedroom.
Exactly.
Right? So you could customize it, right? Because I'm going to guess we're going to look at it, or actually it's behind me.
Yeah.
Right? That plastic housing could be customized.
Color matched to your walls.
Color matched to your walls.
Yeah.
Right? So it doesn't stand out as much. Okay, so we don't want a robot bedside. Reimbursement's there.
Correct.
Patient pain is there.
Correct.
What do you forecast is required to get this through clinicals? And then I don't even think you'd have to get to deploying a commercial team unless you really wanted to get to a 10 or 15x exit.
Right.
Right? So what are you figuring on economics?
In terms of costs?
In terms of investment to get it to a cleared device for this application.
Sure. So our initial plan, I have a great medical advisory board, which you may have seen from the deck that I sent you, but they're very eager to get a system into their labs just to validate the idea of robotically placed masks. So right now I'm trying to raise a $5 million round just to develop a system for initial clinical use. And we're going to deploy that at our luminary sites. After that initial round of clinical data and we expect it to be successful, then we're going to be well positioned to raise a subsequent round, let's say a B round, for example. And that I would say would be about $20 million. So we can develop our first real low cost system that's suitable for getting clearance by the FDA. And in terms of deployment, as you may know, there's DMEs. So we need to find a DME and partner with them, someone who's excited, who realizes the value of this technology, and then we could work with them to do the large scale deployment and go to market.
Sure, and what this offers with this market is a clear and present threat to the current ResMeds and the others in it as well.
Exactly.
Right? That could even be a defensive buy as we've seen that
Exactly,
before.
yes.
Yeah.
Especially with Philips Respironics now, because they're having tons of their recalls. They're losing significant market share. Maybe this will be their saving grace.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I don't like to put nice things on sinking ships, but that's a whole nother
Yeah.
conversation. I said it, you didn't. So let's have a look at the platform, can we?
Sure, yeah, of course.
So what we're looking at here is just a proof of concept. We're
Correct.
going to get a chance to look at the form factor that's a little different in a few minutes.
Sure.
But just from a proof of concept, tell us what we're looking at here in the basics of the tech.
Sure, so the idea is I just bought an off-the-shelf arm because I want to focus on proving if I could do it first before worrying about designing my own low-cost robot. So I bought an off-the-shelf arm, I have an off-the-shelf stereo vision camera, off-the-shelf force sensor, and focused initially on the algorithm development. So the idea is that we take these off-the-shelf components and we can bolt them together and then write some special software using computer vision and develop the algorithms to automatically and safely approach the face with the robot.
And again, the basics here is we've got robotics, we've got AI, we've got facial recognition.
Exactly, force-controlled robotics.
Force control robotics,
Yep.
and this is all, again, just proof of concept.
Exactly.
In the garage.
Exactly.
Literally.
Literally built in the garage,
Right,
yes.
and we were chatting, you've got a whole collection of these heads.
Yes, there's different heads. This is the one that is easy to move around. It's small. The facial recognition is very robust, and this is what I did the initial application development on.
Damn good looking too. All right, what do we got?
Okay, so here you can see in the prototype application, we have the stereo vision camera. The camera is able to identify the facial features. So if Joe, if you can just grab the head and just move the head a little bit, you can kind of see that it's able to track it in real time.
Yeah.
And then once I enable the system to go and place the mask, you'll see it starts adjusting and aligning.
So I'm asleep right now, I've fallen asleep,
Exactly.
there's no mask on me.
Exactly.
Now, and that's an issue with some people because they can't quite fall into that zone.
Exactly.
Right, then now this will go ahead, facial recognition, come into place while I'm sleeping.
Exactly.
And then we'll go ahead and apply the mask.
And hold it
And
on
just
your
hold it
face.
there.
Exactly.
Right.
And then the idea is that, if you shift and the system detects that you've shifted, and let's say you've rolled onto the side.
And again, these are typical force sensors that would readjust the mask. I know we're working on a super prototype right now.
Yeah.
And then we'll come down, evaluate, and then find its way and put the mask back on.
Exactly.
Now, I'm a flipper in bed,
Yeah.
right? I flip, flip, flip. What's the differential in the therapeutic treatment of the PAP of it coming away and I flip and it coming back on? It's a minimal.
No disruption, and we've discussed this point a lot with our medical advisory team. I mean, the requirements for therapy in order to get coverage for insurance, it's a minimum of 4 hours of usage per night for 70% of the nights per month. So as long as you get the therapy for a minimum of 4 hours, it's fine. So if you have intermittent disconnects where you need to shift, not a problem at all, as long as long-term you meet the requirements.
So I shift again.
Yeah, so if you shift again, it backs
right?
away.
Backs away. And my guess is, as we get better and better at this with algorithms and development, the process will shorten.
Exactly. They've already made significant improvements in the face tracking technology for this is using the facial feature recognition is based upon Google's open source media pipe. They've already made improvements 10x with a new paper came out by Microsoft recently. So it's improving exponentially. And it's only going to get better.
And yeah, and what's beautiful about that is you're gathering all this data on board. My guess is, and again, I'm not a data scientist, but if it was me using this, it would start to get a refined signal of what my face looks like.
Exactly.
And then be able to adapt that algorithm a lot quicker.
Exactly. I mean, this is a generic face tracker. Once you personalize it, it's going to be way more robust.
Got it. Awesome. All right, what else should we know about this system right now?
It's just for proof of concept, just to validate the idea that you can automatically have the robot look at a face, automatically find the features, place the mask, and hold it there.
Got it. And then, so I've got this, again, just for proof of concept here, and we'll look at the other form factor that you're proposing right after this. But is this going to be on a stanchion next to the bed? Could it potentially be coming out of a wall unit to be almost like, those lamps that are next to a bed?
Exactly. Yeah. So we're looking at different options. We've looked at options where it is floor mounted or it's on a base of some sort. We've looked at options where Perhaps you'll mount it to the bed frame, or you may want to mount it to the wall. There's all these different options we're considering. I'm working with an industrial designer right now who's going through different iterations.
Super cool. Because I think one of the things is, as we pointed out early, is you've got this piece of electronics equipment, that's, as I refer to, as that what's the resistance, the turd in the punch bowl, is if we can make this as a piece of aesthetic furniture
Correct.
that mimics other pieces, again, lamps coming out of the wall,
Exactly.
Funky things in the bedroom, it's not nearly as sort of intimidating. And again, if you're suffering from the sleep apnea, by the way, what other massive diseases does sleep apnea lead to from a comorbidity perspective that's been evidentially proved?
Stroke, hypertension, AFib, diabetes, chronic fatigue, a lot of very serious.
So it's the on-ramp to some life-ending diseases,
Exactly.
obviously.
Yes.
Yeah, and the cost to the healthcare system, and not even, we didn't even talk about mental health.
Right. Yeah, people are suffering. If you go to the forums, you can go to Reddit or go to some of the CPAPtalk.com forums. People are suicidal. They're struggling between chronic fatigue, or they have to adjust to claustrophobia to try to fall asleep with a mask on, and they're stuck in between the two places, and they're not in a good place.
Yeah, it's a terrible, terrible sort of, again, on-ramp. It doesn't feel like it could be. I've got some issues.
Yeah.
So you've got these other massive comorbidities, and now we're starting to get a diagnostic unlock with some of the other at-home
sleep
diagnostics.
tests. Correct.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Can we have a look at the current form factor beside the proof of concept that you've got rolling?
Sure.
All right, let's
take a look.
Okay, this is the latest iteration of the proposed form factor. We're not locked in here.
Right.
But this shows a very clear progression of it not being this big, intimidating, yet useful initial prototype.
Exactly. So this is the proof of concept for the low-cost robotics technology. So this is something that I designed and built for about $1,500. And in volume, we can get it to a quarter of that, showing that you can make low-cost robots that have the performance you need, that move the way you need, that have the degrees of freedom you need, that aren't as intimidating as the larger robot that you saw earlier.
Yeah, and so again, the general business principle that we're not locked into is you buy the CapEx.
Exactly.
Right, and here's your disposal.
Well, it's the masks, the mask cushions, the hoses. There's going to be an integrated ventilator in here. So we're going to have the water chambers for the ventilator. So all of the typical disposables that are already approved reimbursements, you have to use our proprietary disposables. That's the whole point of the business model. So it's not just the sale of the robot, we get the recurring revenues from the disposables.
Right, so razor blade
Exactly.
concept, as everybody refers to.
Exactly.
And you 3D printed this all out of your garage.
Correct, yeah. This is all 3D printed. This is all plastic, low-cost components, low-cost stepper motors, low-cost electronics. Yes.
Was any of this possible 5 to 7 years ago?
Not for the price point.
Right.
Definitely not for the price point. Prices have been driven down significantly, primarily due to the advent of low-cost 3D printers. Now you have all these, overseas Chinese companies making these super inexpensive components that they typically use for the 3D printers, and I'm using stepper motors, for example, in this robot that gets the price point to where it needs to be.
So this is where I come back to right equipment for the right mission. And one of the things that really attracted me to us chatting about this platform in the first place is robotics in health tech, med tech does not need to be crippling expensive.
Right. Exactly.
Right. So I think we're going to start to see organizations emerging that have this low cost, high performance or appropriate performance for the application.
Yep.
And that'll be that next iteration of surgical robotics, not surgical, healthcare robotics that will, again, market unlocks, access, outcomes for, again, I think we talked about a $4 to $5 billion market, estimated to be close to $9 billion by 2026.
Exactly, correct.
What else should we be looking at on here before we take everybody out?
Just to show that we, have a soft interface, the part that touches the patient is nice and soft. Sometimes there's concern about, the robot hitting you, but again, because you have the cushion of the mask, that's not as much of a concern because you have the nice soft interface.
And that's a mask. Is that proprietary?
This one is an off-the-shelf mask,
okay.
But we haven't designed our own proprietary masks yet. But the plan is we're going to design our own that are specifically designed for the robot.
So with that performance and/or sort of interface will just improve.
Exactly.
Yeah. This is super cool.
Thank you.
Well, listen. Thank you so much for sharing the concept with us.
Sure.
I totally believe there's a market for this. If somebody wants to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
They can go to restfulrobotics.com, and there's an email address, info@restfulrobotics.com.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming in today.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.